This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hey guys, so the new League of Legends cinematic has just dropped a few days ago, and just like Arcane, Riot has knocked it out of the park with this animation. Part of me is making this video just as a lover of video games. I have played way too many games of League, but the better part of me is making this because I think it can be super educational for both aspiring writers and people who just love fiction in general. I've worked as a novel and script editor for about a decade now, as well as writing 5 of my own books, so storytelling and breaking it down is my passion. And as clearly shown by this cinematic, there are a lot of storytelling and writing choices that you can make without needing to employ dialogue. What I want to do here is break down this really cool cinematic from a writing perspective to show that you don't really even need words to craft a great story. If you haven't seen the cinematic all the way through, I highly recommend you do that before watching this video. I will leave a link in the description below for that. If you have seen it, let's establish an understanding of how the cinematic was structured. There are 3 scenes within, and each scene is set up in a 3-act structure. Act 1, introduction. Act 2, midsection, or some call it the rising action. And Act 3 is the climax. This is one of the classic traditional story structures that you have probably heard of already. Furthermore, the 3 different scenes are each totally unique. You have Tryndamere section, Kayle and Morgana section, and Yasuo section. However, being as different as they are linked by this 3-act structure of introduction, rising action, and climax. Think of it as an easy method to give a writer peace of mind in creation. Instead of needing to pick from the infinite ways that a scene could play out, you go to a 3-act structure that gives you guidance and that the audience already loves. We'll get more into this later. But aside from just the structure of how a story is made, it's very important to establish a theme. This actually brings us to the very beginning of the cinematic, where we receive our only dialogue.
Tomorrow is a hope, never a promise.
Tomorrow is a hope, never a promise. What does this mean on its most fundamental level? It's talking about death. Tomorrow is not promised is a very ubiquitous term for death. And for short-form storytelling, and especially for visual short-form storytelling, it's important to establish theme and message because they are what give the narrative shape. And by narrative, I mean the philosophy, the meaning of the fiction, what people are meant to take away. A lot of people confuse narrative and plot. The plot is the literal events of what happens in the fiction. Plot events are the individual pieces that make up the narrative. But getting back to the establishment of the theme, the introductory dialogue is, tomorrow is a hope, never a promise, which is a subtextual poetic way of referring to death and not being able to see tomorrow. Now, is this theme executed and expanded on throughout the fiction? I'd say definitely yes, because each of the 3 sections of the cinematic depict people facing off against what seems like certain death. Tomorrow is not promised for any of these characters, but they fight to see it. What's more, the visual and thematic storytelling is bolstered by the song choice, I'm Still Here. Sure, the song is very catchy and hype, but the actual lyrics, which almost work as added dialogue, are talking about the drive to remain. It's like an anthem about how tomorrow isn't promised, but I will be here anyway. It's all very cool construction of a thematic nature that then talks to us watchers as we engage with the fiction. If this nerdy, very intimate kind of literary analysis is what you like, then you came to the right place, because this is what like the next 20 minutes or so are going to be like, so buckle up. And aside from just my channel, if you want to improve in writing, check out today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes to help you invest in your personal growth. Whether you want to just be a hobby writer or maybe want to make it your career, Skillshare has got you covered. They have educational content on all different types of fiction and writing styles. There are classes on short story writing, character-driven stories, setting a writing routine, and the list really goes on and on for a multitude of other subjects and passions. I don't want to make it seem like it's just a writing-based service either. They can help you improve in a ton of different areas. Skillshare has classes in freelancing, entrepreneurship, marketing, social media, and more. One of my favorite instructors is Mike Lacker, who's an editor and writer like myself, and he has a really great class on how to write funny for the internet. There are so many people who want to make a living online, and Skillshare has awesome resources for that. One of the great services that Skillshare is offering in 2024 are the learning paths. Learning paths are hand-picked classes meant to be taken in order that build on one another. They're available in a range of experience levels from beginner to advanced, and have a variety of categories including design, productivity, creative freelancing, tools, software, like just so much. One that I think a lot of you will be interested in is the learning path focused on growing your own YouTube channel. It has great advice on how to speak on camera, how to keep organized with content creation, and how to video edit if you're into that. I did all my video editing on my own, so it's a really good skill to have. Content creation honestly is one of the best jobs on earth, and getting started is just a click away. In any case, because I like to hook you guys up, the first 500 people who use my link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. This way, there is no real risk if you want to go check it out. So go ahead and look for that link below to start your journey of learning. With that done, and the nitty-gritty of the structural stuff out of the way, we can focus on the specific scenes themselves. Let's go all the way back to the beginning and look at the opening moments.
Tomorrow is a hope, never a promise.
See, this is what I'm talking about. We get the thematic thesis statement, then we immediately see a man grimacing on the ground, surrounded by men with weapons. He's about to die. From a storytelling standpoint, this is an immediate reinforcement of the theme. Furthermore, the visual storytelling used here is great because the closing moments of the scene show the character doing what? Looking into the light as a mysterious figure walks towards him. This again is a universal cross-cultural reference to death. Just from the dozen or so seconds here, the visual storytelling preys heavily on our emotions and subconscious. You may not even have noticed some of these things, but your mind does when consuming the fiction kind of like on its own. Many of you watching who don't even know who this guy is probably felt sympathy for him, but that was curated through visuals, not by accident. His attackers are almost all in darkness while he's in light. Their faces are hidden while his is shown. We even get a sense of his combat prowess because even while being outnumbered, he has still managed to kill a third of his enemies. You see them dead on the ground. All in all, the opening here with Tryndamere on the ground facing death, then staring off into the light, is a great example of how to immediately engage an audience and spark mystery. It pulls us in right from the get-go, while also doing some pretty cool stuff that I'll get to later.
Ripping with my cold hands, the shapes I used to take. I don't like a strong man, but it's easier to push away.
Like I said before, each of the 3 scenes in the cinematic are built using a 3-act structure. What we just saw here was Act 1 of Kael and Morgana's scene, the introduction. We immediately get a sense of who these characters are. 2 angelic beings that have seemingly just fought off an army without a scratch. They are standing in front of a castle, which means they are protecting it from siege. They look to the sky to see a red scar in the clouds and fly towards it. We can assume this red scar to be some type of enemy, but the mystery of who or what is the hook. Remember, the first act is always meant to pull you in. There is always a hook, usually done by some type of tension or mystery. But now the scene has been set, so the characters have been introduced, which allows us to transition into our Act 2 rising action.
'Cause it could all end here with a strange daylight caught in our eyes, and my shadow is stretching out through all the things I left behind. It's in my blood, it's in my veins.
And might I say it was a textbook execution too. We got our antagonist, we got our action, we got our push and pull in the fight. Most importantly, we got our heroes ending Act 2 at their lowest. We see the darkened Aatrox standing tall with an army behind him, and the odds seem overwhelming for our characters. This is classic Act 2 execution. One of the quote-unquote rules of writing is that the greater the conflict a character faces, the truer their reaction to that conflict will be. And since Act 2 leads into the climax, and the climax benefits from the greatest conflict, it is usually most effective to end Act 2 with the heroes at their lowest. This is so that they have the greatest mountain to climb in Act 3, and we get to see what they're really made of. This is why so often in trilogy series, the second entry is the darkest, mainly because it leads into the third entry climax. And speaking of third acts, this is when we start the third act of this scene.
Oh, it's in my blood, it's in my veins. Got my heel crushing the snake. There is nothing you can take. In my blood, it's in my veins. I'm still here.
Holy crap, that will never get old. Anyway, here is what I mean when I refer to characters revealing their truest selves when put in the highest conflict, and it's done so well here. The visual storytelling literally puts their back against a wall, a castle wall, and forces the women to stand against what seems like certain death, again, furthering the established theme. Morgana answers this situation by letting go of her sword, dropping her helmet, and walking towards Aatrox alone, leaving Kael behind. Keep in mind, these women are twin sisters, and everything they have done so far in this cinematic has been together. They flew together, fought together, or even defeated together. But now Morgana is acting alone, shedding the armaments that put her in line with her sister, and we see why. She reaches into some dark power in an attempt to restrain Aatrox. And again, from a visual perspective, a lot of this plays with our psychology and subconscious. The purple eyes, the corruption of the skin, the scowl, the floating hair, the emphasis on the clawed glove. It's all meant to make us think that in an attempt to live, to overcome the great conflict, she has fallen. She's tapped into something she shouldn't have. This visual storytelling is only reinforced and exaggerated by what Kael does. She picks up the sword that Morgana put down, as if to literally carry the burden of righteousness that her sister threw down. She jeers at her sister, screaming in pain as she walks by, and now it's Kael who is ahead alone. And as the inverse of Morgana, Kael becomes bathed in light, glowing with radiance, and uses that newfound power to blast a wave of fire at Aatrox. The relationship between these women, their morals, and the conflict that they face is all understandable just from this single minute that they appear on screen. And again, it's all super well done. That also allows us to move into our next scene, which is mainly action but still super cool.
Far stretch that I won't come undone, but I will brave the cold edge to finish up what I've begun. 'Cause it could all end here with the strange daylight caught in our eyes, and my shadow stretching out.
Again, we have an Act 1 introduction that establishes the scene. We have a burning village, a woman running for safety, and masked swordsmen. Then finally, we have a man coming to defend the woman. Just visually, all this conveys everything that you need to know about the situation. Even a child would be able to understand what's going on here, who to root for and who to root against. But as said before, all good Act 1s have a hook of either mystery or tension, and this is no different. Why are these people attacking the village, and who is this man standing in defense? We stick around to get the answers, which is the purpose of a narrative hook. This leads again into Act 2, Rising Action.
I'm still here. Reasons cut like knives, keep replaying in my mind. All the times I've had to fight, I'm still here.
Act 2 was incredibly straightforward and didn't need to be any more complicated than that. It was just an old man using kendo, and that's really cool. For those with a deeper knowledge of League, we recognize this to be Yasuo, which is interesting because in every other depiction of the character, he is very young. It actually turns out that this was linked to the new skin he would be getting in-game, so that's kind of interesting. Anyway, we now move into our incredibly short Act 3 climax, but its brevity does not diminish its significance to the narrative. The climax here culminates in Yasuo not only finishing off all the assailants before him, but then willingly accepting death. He closes his eyes and lets the arrows rain down on him. This is a pretty cool juxtaposition to Kayle and Morgana's fight to stay alive, and also interacts interestingly with what we're about to see next. It's very much visually a representation of an old, battered warrior who knows his time has come and embraces death willingly after selflessly defending others. And that's pretty cool. Now, on to the final scene.
It's in my blood, it's in my veins.
So, I will be quick with this one. This final scene comes back to Tryndamere, the same man that opened the cinematic. Last we saw, he was looking into the light as someone approached. Now, he is waking from unconsciousness, though it seems like in a completely different place. And while some of you might think this is Act 1 of the scene, it's not. Act 1 was still the opening scene. This is Act 2, Rising Action. And you can see why. I'm actually going to just let the rest of this play out because it's just so cool and it flows super well.
I'm still here.
So, did you guys catch where the Act 3 break was? If you guessed here, you were correct. Ashe comes in, shoots two guys running at Trynd, he realizes he is saved, his anger leaves, and the cinematic ends. Sure, that's all good and dandy, but what the heck was going on here? Well, this final scene was the most heavy on visual storytelling and the subtle context within. Does it still work as just like a cool fight scene to promote a video game? Absolutely. But the deeper thematic execution can only be appreciated through visual storytelling and its dissection. At face value, Tryndamere's fight with the mysterious archer seems completely disconnected from his battle with the men that were surrounding him at the beginning. But let's look at the visual clues that tell us what's actually going on here. First, the setting. It's completely different. The forest is shaded, moonlit, and filled with snow. This is our first clue that all's not as it seems. Then, like the other characters, he is fighting for his life, but nothing he does seems to work. But notice the visuals of how this mysterious hunter is represented. It always seems to be studying him, and at some points even interested or confused. It's animalistic like a predator, but also clearly intelligent. And we get this as well from it lowering its shot at Tryndamere just before the two arrows from Ashe come to save him. This visually seems to suggest that this mysterious archer, who we can call Kindred, either has mercy or no longer sees fit to kill Tryndamere. But again, what does this have to do with Tryndamere and all the men that were attacking him before? Well, there are two more visual storytelling clues here, and they're actually from the previous scenes. Let's go back to Kayle and Morgana versus Aatrox. Did you catch that? Let's look at it again. Do you see that silhouette in the fire that Kayle launches at Aatrox? That's Kindred, the same archer that fought Tryndamere. But that's weird, why would she be in the fire consuming Aatrox? Well, there's another clue for us. Let's go to Yasuo's third act. Did you catch it? One more time. It's subtle, but it's definitely there. In the tree line, you can see two red eyes, which use the shadows around to create the silhouette of a beast staring at Yasuo. And there is one arrow in the sky coming for him that stands out. it's the brightest, fastest arrow. And where have we seen that one before? Yeah, that's Kindred's arrow coming for Yasuo. And now, like all great visual storytelling, we have a pattern. Kindred has been in all 3 scenes, 2 of which characters die. She was in the fire that consumes Aatrox, and she fires the arrow that kills Yasuo. Using this visual information, it now changes our final scene into something much more magnificent. Tryndamere wasn't just fighting some random hunter spirit. He was fighting death. And he fought and fought and fought until death realized it wasn't his time. When Ashe's arrow kills the men behind Tryndamere, that was his life being saved. That's why he appears back in the forest from the start, and we realize that figure approaching him in the light was Ashe the entire time coming to save him. The reason I think this cinematic was so well executed is because I think the thematic message about fighting against death was already fantastic when it was just poetic and allegorical. But then by having a man literally fight against death, it literalizes the theme and takes it to a whole other level. It also deepens the music choice, considering that I'm Still Here is a call to stay alive for a tomorrow that's not promised, and that swell when facing the actual embodiment of death is chef's kiss. And yeah, to put a bow on it all from a structural perspective, remember those opening lines that established the thematic thesis statement about death?
Tomorrow is a hope, never a promise.
It was Kindred who said that. Opening and closing with Tryndamere's fight kept this cinematic from feeling disjointed with its 3 differing scenes because the storytelling became circular. We ended where we started. And the theme of death and Kindred's appearance linked all of them together to create a holistic story. This cinematic was a masterclass in visual storytelling and a great example for all you writers out there hoping to show rather than tell. If you want me to break down your own work like I did here, go ahead and check out my website, link below. You can hire me as your lit editor or your writing coach. Anyway though, thanks for watching all the way until the end. Make sure to check out our sponsor today, Skillshare, if you want to improve your craft and writing. If you like what you heard, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to be a real homie, support on Patreon, buy my books, or check out my TikToks and websites. All links below. As always, it was a pleasure, and I'll talk to you all again soon.